Hello, my friends. Hello, and welcome once again to Stately Vaughan Manor, where Roger and I have returned. For the book of the week, it's time for the book of the week, where I will just grab some random book that's lying around here at Stately Vaughan Manor and talk about it. And since last week I talked about a book by Robert E. Howard, this week I had to talk about a book by Edgar Rice Burroughs. And this is John Carter of Mars. John Carter of Mars. So this contains the first three novels of John Carter, of the John Carter series, or the Martian series by Edgar Rice Burroughs. Commonly referred to nowadays as the Martian trilogy because they all kind of form one story. The story of John Carter's arrival on Mars and his rise to power and prestige on Mars. So this contains a princess of Mars, the gods of Mars, and the warlord of Mars. But what makes this particular edition my favorite, and it is my favorite edition of these books, is that it's illustrated by Thomas Yeates. And I like Thomas Yeates a lot. He's usually pretty good. Thomas Yeates, who is an artist who is a big fan of old-timey adventure, as I am, and he's done a lot of that kind of thing. He's illustrated the Tarzan comic book for Dark Horse, for example. He's also worked on Conan for Dark Horse, if I'm remembering correctly. And he's done a bunch of other stuff. I think he's still doing the Prince Valiant comic strip, if I'm not mistaken. But he's done a lot. And he's a big fan of Edgar Rice Burroughs. So it's kind of cool that he illustrated these first three stories. Now, this particular edition was put out by Fall River Press, which, as far as I know, only sells books to Barnes & Noble. I think it's a line that's only for Barnes & Noble books in the United States, although I could be wrong. But that's the only place I ever saw Fall River books. And this was part of a line called Library of Wonder, which didn't last very long at all, as far as I can tell. I only ever saw two of these. There's this Edgar Rice Burroughs John Carter of Mars edition, but there was also a Jules Verne edition with 3 books by Jules Verne, which wasn't as cool as this one, but it was still kind of cool. And when I initially saw these years ago when they came out, I was hoping that there would be more in this series because this is exactly like the kind of thing that I like. But as far as I know, there were only the 2. I was hoping for an H.G. Wells volume, or an H. Rider Haggard, stuff like that. I was hoping for that, but didn't get it as far as I know. They only had the 2. But the 2 that came out were really nice, and this one is awesome. So, yeah, John Carter. I've talked about John Carter a lot. Next to Tarzan of the Apes, the most important thing that Edgar Rice Burroughs ever did. And I think John Carter actually, even though as a character he is less known than Tarzan, I think the books themselves are probably every bit as influential as the Tarzan novels were, because these had a direct influence on Star Wars, for example. This Flash Gordon was a direct ripoff of John Carter of Mars, and that led to Star Wars along with a bunch of other stuff. This also had an influence on Dune. It had an influence on a lot of science fiction and fantasy. So it's one of those things you're going to want to read eventually if you're into that kind of stuff. And it's just a terrific read anyway. It's fun, pulpy stuff. I love it. John Carter is great. This series is my personal favorite from Edgar Rice Burroughs. Tarzan is my favorite character. Tarzan is definitely the most interesting character that Edgar Rice Burroughs came up with. But the Mars series is my personal favorite, just because it's so full of weird and exciting stuff. What a fully realized world Edgar Rice Burroughs created with Barsoom, which is the Martian name for Mars. They call themselves Barsoomians. They live on Barsoom. There are different races of Martians. There's the green Martians with the 4 arms and the big tusks. And there are the red Martians who look just like human beings from Earth. It's it's cool. And this has the first 3 books. Gods of Mars is my personal favorite. I think it's the best novel in the Mars series. But it's awesome. But like I said, the reason this is cool is the Thomas Yeates illustrations. Has the end papers here with the flyers. So that's cool. Title page, and then we have a picture of John Carter fighting one of the green Martians, which is really awesome. And this book is full of illustrations. There's the illustration for the Princess of Mars. And start off with another picture of John Carter fighting the green Martians, which he did a lot in A Princess of Mars. The first book, he did a lot of that. And this is an illustration of John Carter, the very beginning of the book, back when he was still a Confederate officer. So this shows John Carter's past. And then we get to the first chapter, where he's chased by Apaches and eventually finds the cave where he is transported to Mars. And we have the classic first scene on Mars here where John Carter meets Tars Tarkas for the first time. And this is an important moment because Tars Tarkas becomes his best friend eventually. But at this point, he's still pretty hostile. So Thomas Yeates has an interesting take on Mars. His view of animals, like this is the thoat, which is the multi-legged version of a horse. His version of the thoats, for example, are very much like horses. And I always pictured them as being much more alien. You know, that's the thing about illustrated books. I love illustrated books, but they never picture things exactly the way I do when I read them. And I know that bothers some people. For you know, when you're reading a book that has illustrations. But I just pass up the illustrations when I'm reading. I'm so immersed in whatever I'm reading that I look at the illustrations before or after, really. While I'm reading it, I barely notice them. But they're really interesting in this book, just because he has, you know, such a unique vision of Mars. That's our first glance of Dejah Thoris. Now, everybody is naked, remember, on Mars. They're pretty much naked, and John Carter is completely naked here. And that's Sola, I believe they're probably Tars Tarkas' daughter, but it might not be. And this is, like I said, full of illustrations, so that's Dejah Thoris there. This illustrated volume is awesome. Got the red Martians there and the flyers. And eventually we get to the second book. And this, now Edgar Rice Burroughs didn't know how far he was going to go in the Martian series, so he had John Carter go back to Earth at the end of the first volume. But he has to go back to Mars at the beginning of The Gods of Mars, and this is the moment when he seems to die on Earth once again and goes back to Mars. There's a scene where John Carter is disguised as a Holy Thurn with their blonde hair and is escaping from the Black Pirates of Barsoom. Those are the Black Pirates down there. And that's just such a great illustrated moment from this book. That was a very exciting scene. And this book is full of that kind of thing. The Black Martians who think that they are they think they're pretty much gods on Mars. They think they are people of the highest level, you know. So they take everybody else's women as slaves. And John Carter pretty much takes that civilization apart. But he makes friends along the way, and this is Zodar here. You don't get many illustrations of Zodar, but that's Zodar, who becomes John Carter's good friend and eventually takes over the rule of the kingdom of the Black Martians. So, cool stuff. There's John Carter lurking around the edge of a building, as he frequently does in these books. There are so many illustrations here, I could probably just go on and on showing them to you forever. I don't know the availability of this book right now. I got this one on eBay. I think I got this particular copy. More fights. I'm telling you, this is an exciting series of stories. Those are the yellow Martians there. See, there are multicolored Martians on this planet. And it's fun. It's tremendously fun stuff. And John Carter becomes a leader on Mars, and he helps to unite all of the different Martian cultures. He can't unite everybody, because this is a planet where everybody's always fighting everybody. But he becomes the warlord of Mars at the end, and which is a kind of king of kings kind of position, It's fun stuff, and Thomas Yeates he does some good work in this book. And so that makes it worth it. Like I said, I got this on eBay. I originally had a copy that I bought at Barnes & Noble. I don't know what happened to it. I think I probably lent it out or something and ordered another one so that I could have it. And it's fantastic. If you ever see this lying around, you should pick it up because it's really cool. Okay, I will go now. I will catch you next time.